At the same time, a man arrived at an abandoned warehouse near where Jiang was. He informed his leader that he had returned. Seeing him back, the leader asked why he had taken so long and ordered him to quickly report on what was happening in the spider's nest. The man, hooded and with green hair, was visibly scared. He informed his leader that the spider's nest had been annihilated by someone mysterious and unknown. The destruction was so complete that not a single monster was left alive. His superior, a tall man with braids, couldn't believe what he was hearing. He stared in disbelief, trying to comprehend the magnitude of the situation. He turned his head towards his subordinate and with a surprised look asked if this was some kind of joke. He couldn't believe that someone had completely annihilated the spider's nest. Another man standing nearby approached them, and upon hearing this was shocked. The man with green hair stepped closer, and with a serious expression confirmed that it was true, adding that the city of monsters was in ruins. Upon hearing this, their leader put his hand on his chin and stared at the ground, unable to believe the nest had been reduced to ashes. It was too terrifying to comprehend. Initially, he wondered if the Night Watch could be responsible, but he quickly dismissed the idea, knowing it wasn't their style. He concluded that the responsible party must be a covert operation orchestrated by a clandestine family or a formidable assault group. Deciding that retreat was the wisest course of action, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. They had been tasked with the important mission of collecting venom from a wolf spider. With their mission failed, he resolved to recoup their losses on the journey back by preying on unsuspecting victims. The man beside him, upon hearing this plan, turned towards him, his brow furrowing with sweat and panic. As they conversed, the door of the abandoned warehouse creaked open. Startled by the sound, the trio swiftly turned their heads, and the man with green hair disclosed to the others that they had an unexpected visitor. Upon hearing this, curiosity swirled in their minds, pondering the identity of this newcomer. A man approached the door, placing his hand on it, and as it creaked open, he revealed that he had stumbled upon fellow professionals. Intrigued, the leader inquired about his identity. The newcomer introduced himself as Jiang, stepping into the warehouse. With measured steps, he approached them, extending his hand in a gesture of peace, assuring them not to fret, as his sole purpose in coming was to enhance their capabilities. He also mentioned that he had brought some food to trade. Upon hearing this, their leader felt a wave of relief knowing that Jiang had arrived unaccompanied. Turning towards him, he locked eyes with Jiang, and with a smile, agreed to the exchange, noting that sustenance in the desert came at a cost. After his remark, he inquired about what Jiang wished to trade. The demeanor of the man beside him shifted dramatically. He assumed an aggressive posture, fixing a stern gaze on Jiang. Jiang, undeterred, approached the leader and met his gaze, reassuring him with a smile not to be concerned, mentioning he had valuable items for trade. At this, the man's expression underwent another drastic change. He cast his gaze upon Jiang, a smile tugging at his lips as curiosity piqued within him regarding what Jiang intended to exchange. The leader commanded Jiang to reveal his offerings. In that instant, the two men closed in around Jiang, drawing their swords with smiles on their faces. Jiang simply turned his head slightly towards them, unable to suppress his own smile. From the onset, he harbored doubts about their trustworthiness. Without hesitation, he activated the ring, extending his hand toward them. In an instant, numerous spiders emerged from the ring, their piercing gaze fixed upon the men. Jiang turned away from them, his voice tinged with mockery as he inquired about the quality of his merchandise. Upon encountering the spiders, the men hastily returned their swords to their scabbards, taking several steps back while remaining on high alert. Their gazes fixated on the spiders, beads of sweat forming on their brows as fear gripped them. They recognized the creatures as wolf spiders, prompting them to question whether these arachnids had somehow survived the destruction of the spider's nest. Contemplating this, they speculated whether Jiang had been the one to exterminate the spiders. Jiang Chen's current level stood at 17. He subtly shifted his gaze towards them, fixing them with an intense stare. With a smile, he assured them he was well aware of their suspicions. Following his statement, Jiang settled onto a nearby rock, tilting his head slightly towards them as he calmly disclosed his growing anger. advising them to arm themselves and depart immediately. He made his displeasure known. Upon hearing his words, the three men hastily gathered their belongings, turned away from Jiang, and fled, expressing apologies for the disturbance and affirming their immediate departure. After several minutes had passed and the men had fled the warehouse, Jiang stretched out his hand to the side, unleashing Little Nine's poisonous mist. Commanding the insects to emerge, Jiang remained seated on the rock, one arm casually resting on his knee. With a swift motion, he directed the poisonous mist to release 2 insects. The insects took flight around Jiang, their eyes gleaming with a deadly intent as they scanned for potential threats. Meanwhile, Jiang took a sip of the soup left behind by the men, feeling the pangs of hunger intensify. Reflecting on his decision to acquire Little Nine, he realized he hadn't anticipated the side effects of leading the swarm of insects. As Jiang sipped the soup, a system window materialized, and his devouring value surged. Now standing at 2,768 points out of 1 million, the system urged him to boost this value promptly. Initially, he had anticipated a faster increase in the devouring value once the insect swarm doubled. However, he hadn't foreseen that the devouring value of the subsequent reproduction would also double. This development posed a significant challenge for Jiang, as the devouring value a boss could offer now seemed negligible. Even clearing out all the beast nests outside the city wouldn't suffice to replenish the devouring value for the next reproduction. Jiang cast his gaze downwards, lost in contemplation. He had been informed that the beast nests and secret realms under Nightwatch's control would remain undisclosed. This implied that to augment his swarm's devouring value, he needed to align himself with the Nightwatch promptly. He glanced at his hand, noticing that Little Nine had yet to awaken. Observing this, he swiftly realized the weighty responsibility of reproduction. Suddenly, he sensed another's presence. His demeanor shifted abruptly as he turned his head sharply, questioning the intruder's purpose. Rising to his feet, he clenched his fist tightly, angled his head slightly, and assumed a defensive stance. The scent of conflict filled the air, accompanied by the sound of many people in pursuit. Perplexed by the situation and the reasons behind the girl's chase, Jiang remained unsure of what transpired. Moments later, a girl concealed by an invisibility spell stumbled into the warehouse, colliding with Jiang before tumbling to the ground. It was the same girl from earlier. Using one hand to brace herself against the floor, she gingerly touched her head, wincing in pain. Jiang glanced at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and curiosity, pondering the unexpected reunion. Meanwhile, as the girl lay on the ground, she placed one hand on the floor for support, the other resting on her chest. Lifting her head to meet Jiang's gaze, she immediately recognized him as the boy she had encountered at the spider's nest. She gazed at him with fear in her eyes, pleading for secrecy about her presence. Jiang, taken aback by her request, turned to her with a surprised expression. She had been near him, yet he hadn't detected her presence at all. It didn't take him long to deduce that the person being pursued by the man with the blue hair was her. Determined to escort the girl to safety, he sensed another presence nearby. Swiftly, he turned his head towards the warehouse entrance, his expression turning serious as he realized it might already be too late to depart. Moments later, a group of individuals entered the warehouse, including Zheng Tai and the man with blue hair from the Xiao family. They advanced towards Jiang, and it didn't take long for Zheng Tai to recognize him. A sense of fear and apprehension washed over him. Pointing a trembling finger at Jiang, he informed his leader that Jiang was the same individual they had encountered previously. The man with blue hair casually slipped his hand into his pants pocket, fixing his gaze on Jiang. With a smile, he commended his subordinate for their keen sense of smell. Meanwhile, Jiang resumed his seat on the rock, his hands resting on his knees as he maintained a silent demeanor. Upon closer inspection, the man realized that the area was devoid of others, and Jiang was indeed camping alone. With a glare seething with anger, Zheng Tai fixed his eyes on Jiang, demanding to know if a girl had recently entered the warehouse. He insisted on an immediate response, threatening dire consequences if Jiang hesitated. Observing the tension, the man with blue hair interjected, placing his hand before Zheng Tai, and with a smile, requested him to hold off for a moment, Approaching Jiang, he settled onto the rock opposite him. Aware that Jiang belonged to the spiritual masterclass, he observed how swiftly Jiang had advanced in levels. Less than a day had passed since their last encounter, yet Jiang had already reached level 16. The man's curiosity about Jiang grew with each passing moment. Deciding to table the discussion for now, he announced that he had urgent matters to attend to. As Jiang maintained his silence while seated on the rock, the man rested an arm on his knee, drew his sword, and pointed it at Jiang's neck with a stern expression. Inquiring if Jiang had seen a girl with black hair nearby, he awaited a response. As his subordinates approached and stood behind him in silence, Jiang maintained his composure. Meeting the man's gaze, Jiang swiftly assessed the aura surrounding him, deducing that his level exceeded 30. Realizing the man's ability to accurately discern his class and level, Jiang speculated that he likely possessed specialized detection equipment. Jiang gestured towards the back door of the warehouse, explaining to the man that he had observed a shadow moving in that direction. However, due to not possessing the perceptive class, he couldn't confirm if it was the person they sought. Upon hearing Jiang's explanation, the man rose to his feet, cautiously choosing to trust him. He also cautioned Jiang to be more forthcoming in the future. Jiang, somewhat surprised by the advice, stood up as well. Facing away from Jiang, he angled his head slightly to look back at him, locking eyes with a menacing glare. He warned Jiang that if he discovered any assistance given to the girl, the Xiao family would not overlook it. Upon hearing this, Zheng Tai turned his head slightly towards Jiang, unable to suppress a smile. Several seconds later, the man and his subordinates started to depart from the warehouse. Jiang shifted his body to face them, observing their gradual departure. As they faded from view, he recalled that the Xiao family held the most power in Zhenguo. Fixing his gaze on the man with blue hair, he pondered the extensive history of the clans in the city, all of which held positions as feudal officials. These clans were shrouded in mystery and seldom intervened in worldly affairs unless faced with significant calamity. Some of their most formidable members were said to possess abilities capable of altering the very fabric of the heavens and the earth. This man possessed greater power than Jiang had anticipated, a realization that unsettled him. Being remembered by someone of such influence wasn't advantageous. After a few moments, Jiang glanced towards the warehouse exit and noticed that the men had departed. Recognizing that lingering in this place was unwise, he made the decision to leave as well. Emerging from her hiding spot, the girl approached Jiang, placing her hands on her hips as she expressed gratitude for his rescue. Jiang rose to his feet, facing her without uttering a word. Suddenly seizing her arm, Jiang's action startled the girl, who grew anxious about his intentions. Jiang stepped closer, fixing her with an intense gaze, and accused her of nearly deceiving him again, just as she had done before. Having assisted her once more, Jiang inquired about her predicament with those individuals. With Jiang in such proximity, she couldn't help but blush, meeting his gaze as she revealed her family's significant debt. She went on to explain that the man intended to seize the goods they were transporting and eliminate them all, but he hadn't anticipated her escape. Fearing the possibility of the news leaking out, he had pursued her for this very reason. After elucidating her situation, she questioned Jiang about his intentions to silence her. Upon hearing her words, Jiang released her hand, turned away, and started to walk in the opposite direction. Observing his departure, she placed a hand over her chest, feeling a mix of emotions. Extending her hand towards him, she expressed her eternal gratitude for his assistance and pledged to repay his kindness in the future. As he withdrew from her, he closed his eyes, fists clenched tightly, and firmly stated his reluctance to become entangled in her affairs. Suddenly halting, Jiang's eyes snapped open as a sense of unease washed over him. The girl too sensed the shift, and her expression turned fearful. With trepidation, she informed him that a barrier spell had been cast around the warehouse. Just then, a voice from outside the warehouse commanded their subordinates to emerge. Jiang turned his gaze towards the warehouse entrance, realizing that escape was now improbable. Aware that even if the girl denied knowing him, they would no longer believe her, he activated his insect perception ability. As he moved around the area, he quickly discerned that they were completely surrounded. With a determined expression, Jiang fixed his gaze on the warehouse entrance, prepared to confront any adversary. On the opposite side, the girl grew fearful, clutching her chest with trembling hands. Moments later, the man with blue hair and his subordinates emerged, their presence exuding a palpable aura of danger. Fixing a piercing gaze on Jiang, they prepared to deal the final blow. Sensing Jiang's deception, one of them advanced, locking eyes with him, and demanded that he surrender the girl.